The courtroom was silent except for my mother's voice, cold and calculated as she told the judge I was mentally unstable and a danger to myself and others. My father nodded solemnly beside her, playing his part perfectly. I sat there in handcuffs, watching my own parents try to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. A woman in a dark suit walked in, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She approached the bench, flashed her credentials, and spoke 2 words that changed everything. "Agent Phoenix, I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. That was my call sign. And nobody in that room except her should have known it. 3 months earlier, I was living what most people would call a normal life in Portland, Oregon. My name is Marcus Chen, and I was 26 years old, working as a software developer for a tech startup downtown. I lived in a modest apartment in the Pearl District, spent my weekends hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, and had recently started dating a nurse named Sarah Williams, who I'd met at a coffee shop on Burnside Street. My parents, David and Linda Chen, owned a successful import business that had made them wealthy over the past 2 decades. We weren't particularly close, but we maintained the typical obligatory family relationships: dinner once a month, Christmas together, birthday calls. They lived in a sprawling house in the West Hills, the kind of place with a circular driveway, and too many rooms for 2 people. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in September. I was debugging code when my phone rang. It was my father, which was unusual since he never called me directly. "Marcus, we need to talk," he said, his voice strangely formal. "Can you come to the house tomorrow evening? It's important." When I arrived at their house the next night, both of my parents were waiting in the living room, sitting stiffly on opposite ends of their expensive leather sofa. The atmosphere felt wrong immediately, like walking into a room where people had just stopped talking about you. "Sit down, son," my father said, gesturing to the chair across from them. My mother hadn't even looked at me since I'd walked in, instead focusing intently on her hands folded in her lap. "We've been talking," my father continued, "and we're concerned about you. Your behavior lately has been erratic." I stared at him. "Erratic? What are you talking about? I haven't seen you in 3 weeks." "Exactly," my mother finally spoke, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she'd already made up her mind about something. "You've been isolating yourself, missing family obligations. Sarah called us last week, worried about your mood swings." This was complete news to me. Sarah and I had been getting along fine, and I'd never missed any family obligation that I could remember. In fact, I'd been the one trying to get them to meet Sarah for weeks, but they'd always been too busy. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," I said carefully. "Sarah never mentioned being worried about anything, and I haven't missed any—" "Don't lie to us, Marcus," my father interrupted, his voice sharp. "We've been documenting your behavior. The late-night phone calls where you don't make sense, the paranoid emails, the way you've been talking about your coworkers." I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. "What late-night phone calls? I haven't been sending you any emails, paranoid or otherwise." "And what about my coworkers?" My mother finally looked at me then, and there was something cold in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Marcus, I think you need professional help. We've already spoken to Dr. Patricia Hendricks at Cedar Hills Psychiatric Hospital. She's agreed to see you." The conversation continued for another hour, with them presenting what felt like a completely fabricated version of recent events. According to them, I'd been calling them at all hours, ranting about conspiracies at work. I'd supposedly sent them dozens of incoherent emails filled with technical jargon they couldn't understand. They claimed I'd told them I was being followed, that my apartment was bugged, that my coworkers were spying on me. None of it was true. Not a single word. But the most disturbing part wasn't what they were saying. It was how prepared they were. They had dates, times, and specific details for events that had never happened. They spoke about my supposed breakdown with the kind of rehearsed precision that made it clear this wasn't a spontaneous intervention. I left their house that night feeling shaken and confused. When I got home, I immediately called Sarah. "Hey," she said when she picked up, sounding normal and happy to hear from me. "How was dinner with your parents?" "Sarah, did you call my parents last week? Did you tell them you were worried about my mood swings?" There was a pause. "What?" "No, Marcus. I've never even spoken to your parents. We've been trying to set up a dinner with them for weeks, remember? Why would you ask me that? And have I been acting paranoid lately? Talking about conspiracies or people following me? Marcus, you're scaring me. What's going on? You've been completely normal. Actually, you've been happier than usual since we started dating. Where is this coming from?" That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with my parents, trying to understand what was happening. The next morning, I decided to check my email account to see if somehow I had sent them messages I didn't remember. But when I logged in, my sent folder showed nothing unusual, just normal work emails and a few messages to Sarah. I called my parents' house, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried their cell phones with the same result. When I drove to their house that afternoon, their cars were gone, and the neighbors said they hadn't seen them in days. That's when I found the first envelope. It was slipped under my apartment door, unmarked except for my name written in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. 2847 SE Division Street, 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone. Every rational part of my brain told me not to go, but I was desperate for answers. And this felt connected to whatever was happening with my parents. The address turned out to be a small diner in southeast Portland, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. I arrived exactly at 8 and sat in a corner booth, feeling ridiculous but not knowing what else to do. At 8:15, a woman slid into the seat across from me. She was probably in her early 40s, with short brown hair and the kind of unremarkable appearance that would make her invisible in a crowd. "Marcus Chen," she said, not asking but stating. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows that your parents are lying," she said simply. "And someone who knows why." She ordered coffee from the waitress, then leaned forward slightly. "Your parents are in debt, Marcus. Serious debt. The kind that people don't usually walk away from." "That's impossible," I said immediately. "Their business is successful. They have money." "Their business has been hemorrhaging money for 3 years," she continued calmly. "They've been using credit and loans to maintain appearances, but they're leveraged to the point where they're about to lose everything. The house, the business, all of it." She pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. "Life insurance policy, $2 million. Beneficiaries, David and Linda Chen. Insured party, Marcus Chen, taken out 6 months ago." I stared at the documents, my hands shaking slightly as I flipped through them. It was real. My signature was on every page, but I had no memory of signing any of it. "They forged your signature," the woman said, reading my expression. "But they needed you to be declared mentally incompetent for the accelerated payout clause to take effect. That's what tonight was about. Building a paper trail of your supposed mental illness." "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's not important right now. What's important is that they're not going to stop here. Tomorrow, they're going to file a petition to have you involuntarily committed. They've paid Dr. Hendricks to rubber stamp a psychiatric evaluation that will declare you a danger to yourself and others. Once you're committed, the insurance policy becomes active." I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. This is insane. They're my parents. They wouldn't. They would. And they are, she interrupted. The people they owe money to aren't the forgiving type. Your parents see this as their only way out. She stood up, leaving money on the table for her coffee. "You have maybe 12 hours before they make their move. I suggest you use that time wisely. Wait, I called after her, but she was already walking toward the door. How do I contact you? She turned back for just a moment. You don't. But if things go according to plan, you'll see me again soon. And then she was gone, leaving me alone in that dingy diner with a life insurance policy worth $2 million and the growing realization that my own parents were trying to kill me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with the insurance documents spread out in front of me, trying to make sense of everything. The signatures looked perfect. Even I couldn't tell they were forged. Someone had done professional work here, and that level of sophistication meant this conspiracy went deeper than just my desperate parents. At 6 a.m., my phone started buzzing with texts from Sarah. Marcus, are you okay? Your mom just called me. She says you had some kind of breakdown last night and they're worried about you. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I called her immediately. Sarah, whatever my mother told you, it's not true. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Marcus, you're starting to scare me. Your mom said you might call and try to convince me that they're lying about something. She said it's part of your paranoid episode. The calculated precision of, it hit me like a cold wave. They were already 3 steps ahead, poisoning my relationships, isolating me from anyone who might believe my version of events. Sarah's voice carried doubt now, not because she wanted to doubt me, but because my mother had planted seeds of uncertainty that were already growing. Don't hang up, I said quickly. Can you meet me for coffee this morning? Give me 1 hour to explain, and if you think I'm losing my mind after that, I'll go get help myself. She agreed reluctantly to meet me at our usual spot on Hawthorne Boulevard. But when I arrived at the coffee shop, she wasn't alone. Dr. Patricia Hendricks was sitting across from her, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Marcus, Dr. Hendricks said, standing as I approached, your parents asked me to be here. They're very concerned about you. Sarah looked uncomfortable, trapped between loyalty to me and what was clearly being presented to her as professional. Medical advice. Marcus, Dr. Hendricks was just explaining some things about paranoid episodes and how real they can seem to the person experiencing them. I realized then that I was walking into another trap. Every word I said to defend myself would be twisted as further evidence of my supposed mental instability. If I got angry, I was volatile. If I stayed calm, I was showing classic signs of delusional thinking by maintaining my false beliefs in the face of evidence. Sarah, I said carefully, I love you, and I need you to remember that what I'm about to say comes from someone who has never lied to you. Not once in the 3 months we've been together. My parents are trying to have me committed so they can collect on a life insurance policy. I have the documents to prove it. Dr. Hendricks immediately shook her head. Marcus, this is exactly what we were discussing. The creation of elaborate conspiracy theories to explain away legitimate concerns about your mental health. It's a classic presentation. I pulled out the insurance papers, but Dr. Hendricks smoothly intercepted them before Sarah could see them clearly. These appear to be legitimate documents that you've convinced yourself have some sinister meaning. This kind of paranoid ideation, look at the signature date, I said desperately to Sarah. I can prove I was somewhere else when this was supposedly signed. Check my work calendar, my credit card statements, anything. But Sarah was already backing away, her face showing a mixture of fear and sadness. The professional authority of Dr. Hendricks, combined with my parents' earlier phone calls, had created a narrative that was much more believable than the truth. A young man having a mental health crisis was tragically common. A elaborate insurance, fraud conspiracy involving forged documents and paid-off doctors was the stuff of movies. I think you should go with Dr. Hendricks, Sarah said quietly. Just for an evaluation. If everything is really okay, then you'll be home in a few days and we can figure this out. That's when I knew I was completely on my own. I left the coffee shop, knowing that Dr. Hendricks was probably already on the phone with my parents, reporting that their plan was working perfectly. I had maybe hours before they moved to the next phase, whatever that was. Back at my apartment, I started packing a bag. If I was going to figure this out, I couldn't do it while dodging commitment papers and psychiatric holds. But as I was throwing clothes into a backpack, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Too many footsteps, moving too purposefully. Looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers flanked by a man in a suit who was holding papers. Dr. Hendricks stood behind them, along with my father. They were here for the involuntary commitment. My apartment had a fire escape that led to the alley behind the building. I'd never used it before, but I'd always been glad it was there for emergencies. This qualified. I grabbed my backpack, my laptop, and the insurance documents, then climbed out onto the metal fire escape just as I heard the knock on my front door. Portland Police. We have a court order for a welfare check. The fire escape was old and loud, but the sound was masked by the conversation at my front door. I made it to the alley and started walking quickly toward the street, trying to look casual despite my racing heart. My car was parked out front, but I couldn't risk going back for it. Instead, I called an Uber and had it meet me 3 blocks away. 20 minutes later, I was at a motel on the outskirts of Portland, paying cash for a room and trying to figure out my next move. I couldn't go to the police. My parents had already established a narrative with them about my mental state, and I had no proof of their conspiracy that wouldn't be dismissed as paranoid delusions. I couldn't go to friends or family. They would all be contacted and told I was having a breakdown. I was completely isolated, exactly as my parents had planned. That evening, while hiding in my motel room and monitoring local news to see if there were reports about a missing person with mental health issues, I got a text from an unknown number. Room 247, knock 3 times. I was in room 243. Someone was very close. Every instinct told me this was another trap, but I was out of options. I walked down the motel corridor and knocked 3 times on the door of room 247. The woman from the diner opened it immediately, as if she'd been waiting right by the door. "You made the right choice by running," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "They would have had you committed tonight." Her motel room looked like a mobile command center. Laptops were open on the bed, connected to equipment I didn't recognize. Photos and documents were spread across the desk, and there was a police scanner crackling quietly in the corner. "Who are you?" I asked for the 3rd time since meeting her. "Agent Rebecca Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division," she said, finally, answering my question. "I've been investigating your parents' business for 8 months. She handed me a badge and credentials that looked official, though I had no way to verify them. Their import business is a money laundering operation for a criminal organization based in Vancouver. They've been washing money through fake transactions and inflated invoices for years, taking a percentage for themselves. But they got greedy," she continued, moving to the laptop screens. "They started skimming from the money they were supposed to be washing. The people they work for noticed, and now your parents owe them roughly $3 million that they don't have." The number was close enough to the insurance payout to make horrible sense. "So they decided to cash in their son," I said, the full scope of it finally becoming clear. "Exactly. But here's what they don't know. We've been monitoring their communications. We know about the forged insurance policy, the paid-off doctor, and their plan to have you committed and then arrange for an accident at the psychiatric facility." I sat down hard on the motel room's single chair. "They were actually going to kill me." "Within the week," Agent Martinez confirmed. "But we need your help to stop them and bring down the larger operation. That's where you come in." She turned one of the laptop screens toward me, showing what looked like a chat interface with multiple users online. "We need someone to go undercover in their organization. Someone young, tech-savvy, and with a personal motivation to see this through. someone they would never suspect because he's supposed to be dead soon. You want me to infiltrate a criminal organization? I said slowly. We want you to help us save your life and put some very dangerous people in prison. Your parents made one crucial mistake. They assumed you were just a helpless victim. But you're a software developer with skills we can use, and you have access to their business systems that we can't get legally without a much longer investigation. She pulled out a phone, a burner model I didn't recognize. If you agree to help us, you'll be given a new identity for the operation, a call sign that only I and 2 other agents will know. Agent Martinez looked at me seriously. But I need to know right now, Marcus. Are you willing to risk everything to stop them? Because once we start this, there's no going back. Your old life is over either way. The question is whether you want to be a victim or fight back. I thought about Sarah, who now believed I was having a mental breakdown. I thought about my parents, who were willing to murder me for money. I thought about the life I'd built that was already gone, destroyed by people I'd trusted. What's the call sign? I asked. Agent Martinez smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Phoenix, because sometimes you have to burn everything down to rise again. The transformation began immediately. Agent Martinez drove me to a safe house in Gresham, a nondescript ranch home in a neighborhood where nobody paid attention to strangers coming and going. Inside, I met the rest of the team that would be running my undercover operation. Agent Thomas Rodriguez was a tech specialist who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in months. He had 3 monitors set up in what used to be the living room, running programs I'd never seen before. Agent Jennifer Walsh was older, maybe late 40s, with the kind of weathered face that suggested she'd been doing this work for a long time. She would be my primary handler. First things first, Agent Walsh said, handing me a thick folder. Marcus Chen is about to disappear. Tomorrow morning there will be reports that you were found dead in the Columbia River. Apparent suicide, driven by mental illness and family pressure. Your parents will be devastated, of course. I stared at the fake death certificate, complete with what looked like official signatures and seals. How is this legal? It's not, she said bluntly. But bringing down a multi-million-dollar money laundering operation that's connected to at least 3 murders requires some creative interpretations of protocol. You're dead as far as the world is concerned. The question is whether you want to stay that way or help us make sure your parents join you. Agent Rodriguez turned from his computers. The Vancouver operation calls itself North Pacific Holdings. They've been using your parents' import business to wash money from drug trafficking, human trafficking, and arms deals across the Canadian border. Your parents were supposed to be just a conduit, but they got ambitious. He pulled up financial records on one of his screens. Look at these transaction patterns from the last 6 months. Your parents were supposed to process exactly what came in, take their agreed-upon percentage, and send the rest back clean. But they started creating fake invoices for non-existent shipments, keeping the extra money. The numbers were staggering. My parents had stolen over $3 million from people who killed competitors for much smaller infractions. The head of North Pacific Holdings is a man named Vincent Blackwood, Agent Martinez explained, showing me surveillance photos of a man in his 60s with silver hair and expensive suits. He's got operations in Seattle, Vancouver, and Portland. Very sophisticated, very careful, and very lethal when people cross him. Blackwood sent an enforcer to Portland 2 weeks ago, Agent Walsh continued. A woman named Sophia Reeves. She's been pressuring your parents to come up with the missing money, which is why they accelerated their insurance plan. They know they're living on borrowed time. Agent Rodriguez handed me a new driver's license, credit cards, and a passport. The name read Dylan Cross, and the photo was me with different hair and colored contact lenses that would change my eyes from brown to blue. Dylan Cross is a freelance cybersecurity consultant from San Francisco, Agent Martinez explained. He's got a reputation for being willing to work in gray areas for the right price. Most importantly, he's got skills that North Pacific Holdings needs right now. What kind of skills? Agent Walsh smiled grimly. The kind that can help them track down $3 million in missing money and the people who stole it. You're going to offer to help them find your parents. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. As Dylan Cross, I would approach North Pacific Holdings with an offer to help them recover their stolen money by using my technical skills to track financial transactions and digital footprints. I would position myself as someone who had discovered the theft through freelance work and wanted to profit from the information. But first, Agent Rodriguez said, we need to make you disappear completely and establish Dylan Cross as a real person with a verifiable history. The next 3 days were intensive. They dyed my hair black, taught me to wear different clothes that changed my posture and gait, and had me practice a slightly different accent. Nothing dramatic, just enough to throw off voice recognition if anyone was listening. They created a complete digital history for Dylan Cross, including social media profiles dating back years, work references that would check out if anyone called, and financial records showing successful cybersecurity consulting. Most importantly, they gave me advanced training in the specific technical skills I would need. I already knew programming and systems analysis from my software development work, but Agent Rodriguez taught me about financial tracking software, cryptocurrency tracing, and the kind of digital forensics techniques that would make me valuable to a criminal organization trying to track down missing money. On the 4th day, Agent Martinez showed me newspaper clippings. Local software developer found dead in Columbia River was the headline in the Oregonian. The article described Marcus Chen as a troubled young man who had been struggling with mental health issues and family pressure. It quoted my parents expressing their devastation and regret that they hadn't been able to get me the help I needed. Reading about my own death was surreal. The article made me sound like a tragic figure, someone whose life had spiraled out of control until suicide seemed like the only option. My parents played their parts perfectly, coming across as grieving relatives who had tried everything to save their troubled son. Sarah was quoted briefly, saying she had noticed changes in my behavior, but hadn't realized how serious the situation was. The article mentioned that I had been scheduled for a psychiatric evaluation, but had disappeared before it could take place. Perfect, Agent Walsh said, reading over my shoulder. Now Dylan Cross can make contact. The approach had to be subtle. North Pacific Holdings wasn't the kind of organization you could just call and ask for a job interview. Instead, Agent Martinez had me start frequenting certain bars and coffee shops in Northwest Portland where members of their operation were known to conduct business. The first contact came after 5 days of patient surveillance work. I was sitting in a booth at a restaurant on Northwest 23rd Avenue, ostensibly working on my laptop, but actually monitoring the conversation at a table across the room where 2 men were discussing shipping schedules and payment transfers in coded language. That wasn't quite coded enough. When they finished their meal and left, I followed at a distance. One of them walked to a black BMW parked on a side street. As he was getting in, I approached. "Excuse me," I said, making sure to sound slightly nervous. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation in there. Are you guys involved with North Pacific Holdings?" The man was in his 30s, well-dressed, but with the kind of build that suggested he spent time in a gym for practical rather than aesthetic reasons. His hand moved slightly toward his jacket before he caught himself. "Who's asking?" "Dylan Cross. I'm a cybersecurity consultant, and I think I have information your organization would find valuable. Information about some missing money." His expression changed immediately from suspicion to interest. "What kind of information?" "The kind that's worth $3 million to the right people," I said, then handed him a business card with Dylan Cross's contact information. "If your bosses are interested in recovering what was stolen from them, have them call me." I walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing by his BMW with my business card in his hand. Agent Walsh had been watching from a coffee shop across the street, and she confirmed through her earpiece that he immediately made a phone call after I left. The call came 2 days later. Mr. Cross? This is James Morrison. I understand you have some information that might interest my employers. Possibly. Depends on whether your employers are the people who are missing approximately $3 million from a money laundering operation that was compromised by greedy intermediaries. There was a long pause. Where would you like to meet? Waterfront Park, by the Salmon Street Springs. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone and bring authorization to make decisions. I don't waste time with middle management. The next afternoon, I sat on a bench watching the fountain and waiting. James Morrison turned out to be the man I'd approached at the BMW, and he wasn't alone despite my instructions. Sophia Reeves walked beside him. I recognized her from the FBI surveillance photos. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with auburn hair and the kind of controlled movement that suggested serious training in violence. Mr. Cross, Morrison said as they approached. This is my associate, Ms. Reeves. I said, come alone. Ms. Reeves has particular expertise in the matter you mentioned, Morrison replied smoothly. She's been handling the recovery efforts personally. Sophia Reeves studied me with pale green eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about my appearance and behavior. You said you have information about our missing assets. What kind of information, and what do you want for it? I pulled out a tablet and showed them a screen displaying financial transaction records, real records that Agent Rodriguez had helped me access through FBI databases, but presented as if I'd discovered them through my own investigation. I know who stole your money, where they've been hiding it, and how to get it back, I said. But I don't work for free, and I don't work for people who aren't serious about results. Sophia leaned forward slightly. What do you want? $500,000 and a guarantee of safe passage out of the country once the job is done. In exchange, I'll deliver your money and the people who stole it. She exchanged a look with Morrison, then turned back to me. You'll need to prove you can deliver before we discuss payment. I showed them another screen on my tablet, this one displaying real-time location data for my parents' cell phones. Agent Rodriguez had helped me hack into their carrier's GPS tracking systems. David and Linda Chen, currently hiding at a cabin in Bend, Oregon. They think they're safe because they've been using cash and burner phones, but they forgot about the GPS tracking in their car's navigation system. Sophia Reeves smiled for the first time since I'd met her, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Mr. Cross, I think we're going to get along very well. The meeting with Vincent Blackwood took place in a penthouse suite at the Nines Hotel in downtown Portland. Sophia Reeves escorted me up in a private elevator, her hand never straying far from the concealed weapon I was sure she carried. The luxury was understated but obvious. Everything in the suite probably cost more than most people made in a year. Blackwood was exactly what I'd expected from the surveillance photos, but his presence was more commanding in person. He sat behind a mahogany desk that dominated the room, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost $5,000. Two other men flanked him, bodyguards who looked like they could crush skulls with their bare hands. Mr. Cross, Blackwood said without standing. His voice carried a slight Canadian accent. Sophia tells me you've located our wayward business partners. I've located them, tracked their financial movements for the past 6 months, and identified exactly how they've been skimming from your operations, I replied, setting my tablet on his desk. But before I hand over that information, I need assurance that my terms will be met. Blackwood smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're either very brave or very stupid making demands in this room. Which is it? I'm practical. Dead consultants don't collect payment, and consultants who don't get paid don't deliver results. I assume you want results. He gestured to Sophia, who pulled out a briefcase and opened it on the desk. It was full of cash, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. $100,000, Blackwood said. A good faith payment. You'll get the rest when David and Linda Chen are delivered to us along with our missing $3 million. I forced myself to look calm despite my racing heart. These people were discussing my parents' murder as casually as ordering dinner. The money trail is complex, I said, pulling up financial records on my tablet. They didn't just steal from you directly. They created an entire network of shell companies and fake transactions to hide the theft. It's actually quite sophisticated. This part was true. Agent Rodriguez had helped me understand exactly how my parents had been laundering money, and their skimming operation was more elaborate than I'd initially realized. They had been very careful to make their theft look like legitimate business expenses and transaction fees. "Show me," Blackwood commanded. I spent the next hour walking him through the financial maze my parents had created. Fake shipping costs, inflated customs fees, non-existent storage expenses, dozens of small charges that added up to millions of dollars over time. Each transaction looked legitimate on its own, but the pattern revealed systematic theft. "Impressive work," Blackwood admitted when I finished. "I can see why they thought they could get away with it. How did you discover this?" "I was hired by a competitor of yours to investigate money laundering operations in the Pacific Northwest." I lied smoothly. David and Linda Chen's names came up in connection with some suspicious import transactions. When I dug deeper, I realized what they were actually doing and who they were stealing from. "And you decided that information was more valuable to us than to your original client." "My original client was paying me $50,000 for a report. You're paying me $500,000 for results." "I'm a businessman, Mr. Blackwood." He laughed. And for a moment his mask slipped enough to reveal something genuinely amused underneath the calculated menace. "I respect that. Very well, Mr. Cross. You have 48 hours to deliver David and Linda Chen to us, alive. We have questions for them before we settle accounts." As Sophia escorted me back down to the lobby, she spoke quietly. "Word of advice. Vincent doesn't like surprises, and he doesn't forgive failure. Make sure you can deliver what you've promised." "I always deliver," I replied, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. Back at the safe house, the FBI team was monitoring everything through the wire I was wearing. Agent Walsh looked grim as she played back the recording. 48 hours, she said. "That's not much time to coordinate the arrests and make sure we get everyone." "What about my parents?" I asked. "They really are at that cabin in Bend. Blackwood's people will go after them. We'll have agents in place before anyone else gets there," Agent Martinez assured me. "But we need to be careful about the timing. If we move too early, we blow your cover and lose the chance to get Blackwood and the whole organization." Agent Rodriguez looked up from his computers. "I've been monitoring chatter on their encrypted communications. They're planning something big for next week. A major shipment coming in from Vancouver that's worth at least $50 million. If we can time this right, we can catch them with the goods and get everyone at once." The next 24 hours were tense. I had to maintain contact with Sophia Reeves, feeding her updates on my supposed progress tracking down my parents while the FBI coordinated one of the largest organized crime takedowns in Portland's history. Federal agents were positioning themselves at multiple locations across the city, and Canadian authorities were preparing simultaneous raids in Vancouver. The plan required precision timing. Too early and we'd miss the major players. Too late, and my parents would be dead. On the morning of the second day, Sophia called me. "Vincent wants an update. Where are we on delivery?" "I've confirmed their location and identified their escape routes," I told her. "But there's a complication. They've got the missing money with them, but it's in a safety deposit box at a bank in Bend. We'll need them alive and cooperative to access it." This was partly true. My parents did have safety deposit boxes, though Agent Martinez had confirmed they were mostly empty. But it would buy them time once Blackwood's people found them. "How do you want to handle the extraction?" Sophia asked. "I'll guide your people to them, but I stay back during the actual confrontation. I'm a consultant, not muscle." "Fair enough. Meet us at the warehouse on Swan Island tonight at midnight. Vincent wants this finished." The warehouse on Swan Island was perfect for what the FBI had planned. It was isolated, had multiple access points for tactical teams, and was far enough from residential areas that civilians wouldn't be at risk during the takedown. I arrived at 11:45 p.m., wearing a wire that would transmit everything to the FBI teams, positioned around the building. Blackwood was there with 6 men, including Sophia and Morrison. 2 black SUVs were parked inside the warehouse, and I could see weapons being distributed to the team. "Mr. Cross," Blackwood said as I approached, "ready for a road trip to Bend?" "Actually, there's been a change," I said, my heart pounding. "I received word from my monitoring systems an hour ago. David and Linda Chen are on the move. They're driving back to Portland tonight." This was the signal. Agent Martinez and her teams would be moving into position, and my parents, who were actually in protective custody at a safe house in Salem, would never be in danger. Blackwood frowned. "Where are they headed?" "Their original house in the West Hills. My surveillance shows they're planning to retrieve something from there before trying to leave the country. Then we intercept them there," Sophia said immediately. "With respect," I interrupted, "that's a terrible idea. The West Hills are full of security systems and nosy neighbors. Too many variables, too much exposure." "What do you suggest?" Blackwood asked. "We wait for them to leave the house with whatever they're retrieving, then take them on the road. I've identified 3 choke points on their likely route where we can force them off the highway with minimal witnesses." Blackwood considered this, then nodded. "Solid thinking. Sophia, take your team and set up at the first choke point. Morrison, you cover the second. I'll position myself at the third with Mr. Cross." As the teams prepared to leave the warehouse, FBI agents in tactical gear rappelled through the skylights and burst through every entrance simultaneously. "FBI! Everyone on the ground! Now!" The warehouse erupted in chaos. Blackwood's men reached for their weapons, but they were outgunned and outnumbered. Sophia managed to draw her pistol before an FBI sniper put a bullet through her shoulder, dropping her to the concrete floor. Blackwood himself never moved. He stood perfectly still as agents swarmed around him, his hands visible and his expression calm. Even as they cuffed him, he looked directly at me. "Very impressive, Mr. Cross," he said quietly. "Or should I say, Agent Phoenix?" My blood went cold. He knew. "Vincent Blackwood, you're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering," Agent Martinez announced as she approached. But Blackwood was still looking at me. "Did you really think we wouldn't investigate our new consultant?" he asked. "Dylan Cross exists, but he's been dead for 3 years. Car accident in San Francisco. Very thorough identity theft. I'll give you credit for that." Agent Walsh stepped forward. "It doesn't matter what you know now. We have enough evidence." "You have nothing," Blackwood interrupted. "Whatever evidence you think you've gathered, it won't stand up in court. And Agent Phoenix here just burned his cover for an operation that's going to fall apart the moment my lawyers get involved." He smiled at me as the agents led him away. "See you soon, Marcus Chen. Your parents send their regards." The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of sirens approaching in the distance. Agent Martinez put her hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. "How did he know?" I asked. "We'll figure that out," she said, but her voice carried doubt. "The important thing is that we got them." As we walked out of the warehouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that Vincent Blackwood's arrest was exactly what he had wanted to happen, and somewhere in the darkness, I realized this was far from over. The FBI safe house felt different when I returned that night. Agent Martinez was pacing back and forth in the living room, while Agent Rodriguez frantically worked at his computers, trying to trace how Vincent Blackwood had discovered my real identity. Agent Walsh sat at the kitchen table, going through transcripts of recorded conversations with a grim expression. "We have a leak," Agent Walsh said without looking up when I walked in. "Someone fed Blackwood information about the operation. Or he's just very good at what he does," Agent Rodriguez suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "These criminal organizations have resources we don't always account for." But I was thinking about something else entirely. He said my parents sent their regards. How would he know anything about my parents if they're in protective custody? Agent E. Martinez stopped pacing. What exactly did he say? His exact words were, "See you soon, Marcus Chen. Your parents send their regards." The three agents exchanged looks that told me they were thinking the same thing I was. Vincent Blackwood shouldn't have known anything about my parents' current situation. Unless the leak went deeper than just my blown cover. "I need to make a call," Agent Walsh said, pulling out her phone and walking into the other room. I could hear her speaking in low, urgent tones, but couldn't make out the words. Agent Rodriguez turned from his computers. "Marcus, I need you to think carefully. During your time undercover, did Blackwood or anyone else say anything that seemed like they knew more than they should? Any references to specific details about the FBI operation?" I replayed conversations in my mind, focusing on moments that had felt slightly off. When I first met Sophia Reeves, she asked what I wanted for the information. When I said 500,000 and safe passage out of the country, she agreed almost immediately. Most people would have negotiated. What else? Blackwood knew I was wearing a wire tonight. He positioned himself so his back was to the wall and spoke directly into where he knew the microphone would be. That's not standard caution. That's someone who knows exactly what kind of surveillance he's dealing with. Agent Walsh returned from her phone call, her face pale. "We have a problem. The safe house in Salem where your parents are supposed to be in protective custody? It's empty, has been for 6 hours. The room went dead silent. Agent Martinez was the first to speak. Empty how? Did they escape or? Unknown. The agents assigned to watch them haven't reported in since this afternoon. I felt like I was falling through the floor. You think my parents are dead? I think we've been played from the beginning, Agent Walsh said grimly. Vincent Blackwood is a lot smarter than we gave him credit for, and someone on our side has been feeding him information. Agent Rodriguez's computers started chiming with incoming messages. He read them quickly, his expression growing more troubled by the second. The raids in Vancouver didn't go according to plan either. The locations we hit were clean. No drugs, no money, no evidence of criminal activity. Just empty warehouses and office buildings. How is that possible? Agent Martinez demanded. Because someone told them we were coming, I said, the pieces finally clicking together. Blackwood wasn't surprised by the FBI raid tonight. He was expecting it. The whole thing was theater. Agent Walsh's phone rang. She answered it, listened. For a moment, then hung up with a look of barely controlled panic. Vincent Blackwood made bail 20 minutes ago. His lawyers had the paperwork ready before he was even processed. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Blackwood was free, my parents were missing, and the FBI operation had been completely compromised. But there was something else. Something that had been bothering me since the warehouse. Agent Martinez, I said slowly, when you told me my call sign would be Phoenix, you said only you and 2 other agents would know it. Who were the other 2? She hesitated just long enough to confirm my growing suspicion. Agent Walsh and Agent Rodriguez. I looked at the 3 of them, the people who had promised to protect me, who had convinced me to fake my own death and go undercover to catch my parents' killers. One of them had been working for Blackwood from the beginning. There's something else, Agent Rodriguez said quietly, still staring at his computer screen. The financial records we used to build the case against North Pacific Holdings. Someone accessed them from outside our secure network 30 minutes before the warehouse raid. They downloaded everything. Downloaded them where? Agent Walsh asked. That's the interesting part. The access came from inside the FBI building in Portland. Someone with legitimate credentials copied our entire case file and sent it to an encrypted email address that bounces through servers in 12 different countries. Agent Martinez drew her service weapon. Nobody moves until we figure out who's been feeding information to Blackwood. But Agent Walsh was already reaching for her gun, as well. Rebecca, put the weapon down. We need to handle this systematically. The systematic approach got Marcus's parents kidnapped and blew our entire operation, Agent Martinez shot back, keeping her pistol trained on Agent Walsh. How do we know it wasn't you? Because I'm the one who called this into headquarters, Walsh replied, her own weapon now drawn. Thomas, back away from the computers. Agent Rodriguez raised his hands, stepping away from his workstation. This is insane. We're all on the same side here. Are we? I asked, looking at each of them in turn. Because Vincent Blackwood knew things that only someone with access to FBI intelligence could have told him. Agent Martinez's phone buzzed, with a text message. She glanced at it while keeping her weapon trained on Agent Walsh. Backup teams are en route. We'll sort this out at headquarters. But Agent Walsh shook her head. No, Rebecca, we're not going anywhere. That's when I noticed Agent Walsh's finger moving toward the trigger of her pistol. She wasn't planning to arrest anyone. She was planning to eliminate witnesses. I dove behind the couch just as Agent Walsh's gun went off. Agent Martinez rolled to the side, returning fire as Agent Rodriguez scrambled for cover behind his computer desk. The safe house erupted in gunfire, with bullets shattering windows and punching holes in the walls. Jennifer Walsh has been working for North Pacific Holdings for 8 months, Agent Martinez shouted over the noise of gunfire. She's the leak. Agent Walsh's response was another burst of gunfire that splintered the wooden coffee table I was hiding behind. Vincent Blackwood offered me more money in 6 months than the FBI pays me in 5 years, and all I had to do was make sure certain operations didn't succeed. What about Marcus's parents? I called out, trying to keep her talking while Agent Martinez maneuvered for a better position. They're alive, for now, Walsh replied. Vincent wants to have a conversation with them before he decides what to do. Same conversation he's planning to have with you, Marcus. Agent Rodriguez had managed to reach one of his computers during the firefight. I'm sending a distress signal to headquarters. Full tactical response is en route. They won't get here. In time, Walsh said, and I could hear her reloading her weapon. Vincent's people are already surrounding this building. You have about 3 minutes before they come through those doors. As if summoned by her words, I heard the sound of vehicles pulling up outside the safe house. Car doors slammed and footsteps surrounded the building. We were trapped. Agent Martinez looked at me from her position behind the kitchen counter. Marcus, there's a basement access through the laundry room. Get out of here while we hold them. Off? I'm not leaving you here. You don't have a choice. If Vincent Blackwood gets his hands on you, everything we've done is worthless. Your parents' only chance is if you stay free and find another way to get to them. The front door exploded inward, and men in tactical gear poured into the house. But these weren't FBI agents. They were Blackwood's people, armed with military-grade weapons and moving with professional precision. I ran for the laundry room as Agent Martinez and Agent Rodriguez opened fire on the intruders. Behind me, I heard Agent Walsh shouting directions to Blackwood's team, telling them which rooms to clear and where to find us. The basement was unfinished, with concrete walls and a dirt floor. I found the escape tunnel that Agent Martinez had mentioned, a narrow passage that led to a storm drain system connecting to the street 3 blocks away. As I crawled through the tunnel, I could hear gunfire echoing through the house above me. When I finally emerged from the storm drain, I was in a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. My clothes were filthy, I had no money, no identification, and no way to contact anyone who might help me. The FBI team that was supposed to protect me was either dead or captured, and Vincent Blackwood was free. But as I stood there in the darkness, trying to figure out what to do next, I realized something important. I wasn't Marcus Chen anymore, and I wasn't Agent Phoenix either. Both of those identities had been burned by Agent Walsh's betrayal. I was someone new now. Someone that neither my parents nor Vincent Blackwood would see coming. I pulled out the burner phone Agent Martinez had given me for emergencies. There was one number programmed into it, with a simple label, Last Resort. I dialed the number and waited. Agent Phoenix, a woman's voice answered on the first ring. We've been expecting your call. The voice on the other end of the phone belonged to Deputy Director Catherine Hayes, FBI Internal Affairs. She gave me an address in Southeast Portland and told me to come alone, trusting no one until I reached the location. 20 minutes later, I stood outside a 24-hour diner that looked like it had been serving coffee and disappointment since the 1960s. Inside, Deputy Director Hayes sat in a corner booth, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was alone except for a single bodyguard positioned near the entrance, a precaution that told me even FBI leadership didn't feel safe anymore. Marcus Chen, she said as I slid into the booth across from her. Or should I say, the man who doesn't exist. Officially, you drowned in the Columbia River 3 weeks ago. Agent Walsh was working for Blackwood, I said without preamble. She fed him everything about the operation. We know. Agent Jennifer Walsh has been under investigation by Internal Affairs for 2 months. We suspected she was compromised, but we needed proof. Your undercover operation was never about catching Vincent Blackwood. It was about exposing the corruption in our own ranks. The words hit me like a physical blow. You used me as bait. My parents are missing because you wanted to catch a dirty agent. Your parents volunteered for protective custody when we explained the situation to them 3 days ago. They're currently in a secure facility in Montana, very much alive, and very interested in making amends for their criminal activity in exchange for reduced sentences. I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. They're safe? Completely safe. The story about them being kidnapped from the Salem safe house was disinformation we fed to Agent Walsh to see how quickly it would reach Blackwood. It reached him in under an hour. Deputy Director Hayes pulled out a tablet and showed me surveillance footage from earlier that evening. This is from the warehouse raid. Watch Vincent Blackwood's face when the FBI announces their presence. In the video, I could see Blackwood's reaction to the FBI assault. Instead of surprise or fear, his expression showed something closer to satisfaction. He had wanted to be arrested. Blackwood's organization was already compromised by multiple law enforcement agencies, Hayes explained. DEA, ATF, Canadian authorities, everyone was closing in. His arrest tonight was an exit strategy. He gets to serve a reduced sentence in minimum security while his lawyers negotiate immunity deals, and his lieutenants continue running the organization from the outside. But why involve me at all? Because we needed someone Vincent Blackwood would trust enough to reveal his FBI contact. Agent Walsh had been feeding him information for months, but we couldn't prove it through normal channels. We needed her to expose herself. Hayes showed me another screen on her tablet, this one displaying financial records. Jennifer Walsh received over $2 million from North Pacific Holdings over the past 8 months. She used her position to sabotage investigations, warn criminals about upcoming raids, and provide sensitive intelligence to hostile organizations. What about Agent Martinez and Agent Rodriguez? Both clean. Both are currently in the hospital with gunshot wounds, but expected to recover fully. They were never told about the real nature of the operation. Their reactions had to be genuine for the deception to work. I sat back in the diner booth, overwhelmed by the scope of what had actually happened. Everything I thought I knew about. The past 3 weeks had been carefully orchestrated theater, with me playing a role I didn't even know I'd been cast in. So, what happens now? I asked. Deputy Director Hayes smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Now we finish what we started. Vincent Blackwood thinks he's won, but his arrest was just the opening move. While he's been focused on you and Agent Walsh's betrayal, we've been dismantling his entire organization from the inside. She pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the table between us. Arrest warrants for 43 members of North Pacific Holdings, including financial managers, drug suppliers, weapons dealers, and corrupt officials in 3 different countries. Seizure orders for over $200 million in assets. Complete shutdown of their money laundering networks across the Pacific Northwest. But Blackwood made bail. Blackwood made bail into a federal courthouse surrounded by agents who have been watching his every move for the past 6 hours. He led us directly to safe houses, backup financial accounts, and emergency contacts that we never would have found otherwise. Hayes opened the folder and showed me surveillance photos taken throughout the evening. Vincent Blackwood met with various associates, each encounter monitored and recorded by federal agents. Every person he's contacted since his release has been arrested. Every location he's visited has been searched. Every financial transaction has been traced and frozen. Vincent Blackwood spent the evening systematically destroying his own criminal empire without realizing it. And my parents? Will testify against North Pacific Holdings in exchange for immunity and entry into witness protection. Their money laundering activities were significant, but they're small fish compared to the organization they were working for. Deputy Director Hayes closed the folder and looked at me seriously. Marcus, you have a choice to make. Marcus Chen is officially dead, and that identity needs to stay buried for your safety. But Dylan Cross can live on, and the FBI could use someone with your technical skills and proven ability to work undercover. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a new life. A chance to do work that matters, with people who won't betray you for money. The corruption in our ranks goes deeper than Agent Walsh, and we need people we can trust to help us root it out. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with a message. She read it quickly, then looked up with satisfaction. Vincent Blackwood just tried to access an emergency bank account in the Cayman Islands. The account doesn't exist anymore because we froze it 3 hours ago. He's starting to realize that his escape plan isn't going to work. What will happen to him? Life in federal prison, assuming he lives long enough to stand trial. The people he's been working with don't appreciate being exposed to law enforcement. His arrest tonight started a chain reaction that's going to destroy criminal networks across 2 countries. Deputy Director Hayes stood up from the booth. I need an answer, Marcus. Agent Phoenix was born tonight in that warehouse, and he can either disappear forever or become something more. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. My parents' betrayal, Sarah's doubt, Agent Walsh's corruption, Vincent Blackwood's manipulation. All of it had been leading to this choice, between the safety of anonymity and the risk of continuing to fight. What would Agent Phoenix do exactly? Hunt down corrupt agents, infiltrate criminal organizations, and make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. It's dangerous work, but it's important work. I looked around the diner, at the late-night customers nursing coffee and the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. This wasn't where I'd expected my life to end up when I was debugging code in my Portland apartment just a month ago. But maybe that was the point. Sometimes you had to burn everything down to build something better. Agent Phoenix accepts the assignment, I said. 6 months later, I sat in that same courtroom where this story began, listening to my parents' lawyer argue that they were mentally unstable and not responsible for their actions. It was a desperate legal strategy, but not an unexpected one. When the heavy oak doors opened and Agent Martinez walked in, fully recovered from her gunshot wounds and promoted to lead the FBI's new anti-corruption task force, I felt a satisfaction that Marcus Chen never could have experienced. She approached the bench, showed her credentials to the judge, and spoke 2 words that changed everything for the final time. Agent Phoenix. My parents' faces went white as Agent Martinez began presenting evidence of their money laundering activities, their insurance fraud conspiracy, and their cooperation with a criminal organization that had been completely dismantled thanks to their testimony. The judge dismissed their mental incompetence defense and sentenced them to 5 years in minimum security prison, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. They would never be wealthy again, but they would be alive, which was more consideration than they had planned to give me. As I left the courthouse that day, I realized that Vincent Blackwood had been wrong about one thing. Marcus Chen hadn't risen from the dead. Agent Phoenix had been born from the ashes of everything Marcus Chen used to be, and he was just getting started. The fight against corruption was far from over, and there were more Vincent Blackwoods out there, more Agent I. Walshes selling their integrity for money, more families being torn apart by greed and betrayal. But now there was also Agent Phoenix, and he had learned something important in that warehouse. Sometimes the only way to win is to make your enemies believe they've already beaten you. The Phoenix always rises. And this time, it was ready for war. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.